Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's overperforming his expected content per season. It's John Precoda.
Woo! Get ready for some terrible regression to the mean, Raphie. But what I mean is continue watching our shows, please.
Yes. We've been on a little bit of a heater lately. Back from the honeymoon, we're in the midsummer. It's the dog days, but we're pushing through. We're not pressing, unlike some people we're going to be talking about later. But we're feeling good. So we're coming to you. We're recording this on Friday, August 11th, right before the Padres are about to begin their series in Arizona against the Diamondbacks. Critical series. You're listening to this probably after that series is done. So let's give everyone a happy face really quickly, in case we swept. Okay, and now a sad face. Okay, cool. So we got the bases covered. We have both outcomes. We're gonna cut that, at the end of this. So you didn't hear whatever the other one is. Don't worry about it. We hope you're watching us on YouTube.
Can you send pictures onto the YouTube comments? Because I would love people's reactions or facial reactions to
we need some emojis of people giving thumbs up and thumbs down to us. So yeah, all that's to say, we hope you saw us make faces on YouTube just now. We hope you're subscribing to us. And if you're listening to this right when it comes out, you still have a couple hours to try and go back to the last Padres Hot Tub video and comment on it and subscribe to our channel, and you could put yourself in a Blake Snell autograph ball sweepstakes. So ignore that if you're listening to this past Monday night. The best way to support the show is to become a patron at patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub, getting in our Pods Above Replacement Discord channel, which heard my bullying. Bullying works is another message of this podcast. Because that thing is active once again. And I really appreciate everyone hopping in there this week, especially when the Padres had another frustrating week on the field. Lots to talk about there. And in the topic of nerdiness and stats and baseball, we are going to have an episode today in which we review the Padres preseason ZiPS projections. ZiPS, of course, being the preeminent projection system that Fangraphs uses. Dan Szymborski at Fangraphs is the one who spearheaded and pioneered that projection system. And it, do you agree, John, that it's your projection system of choice? It certainly is mine.
Yes, it is my favorite. I like to look at them all for kind of different reasons. But that one is kind of like the vanilla of the projection systems for me. It's like the one I can go back to the most and enjoy it the most. There's other ones that are like kind of evolving a little bit more. Like the Bat X is a little bit more of like statistical or Statcast driven. But I don't know if they've. To me, it doesn't feel like it's been like it's gone through to its maximum capacity quite yet. That's the one to kind of watch as years go on, is the Bat X for me. But ZiPS is the most fully developed, and it's the vanilla. It's the one I always go back to.
Yeah, I think of it like the Toyota Camry of projections.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it's dependable. You can ride it 200,000 miles. Like you're going all the time. ZiPS puts out a preseason projection every season of every player and like players in the farm system and everything like that. Like if they came up and played in the major leagues, this is what we think that their stats would be. This is how much playing time we think that they would get, and therefore generate these stats, et cetera, et cetera. So we're comparing the Padres hitters ZiPS stats to, what they've actually done this year. And next week we're going to be covering pitchers, which I think has an interesting conversation there. But for today, we're just going to be focusing on hitters. And as help for this, John and I have, with our bare digital hands, made a spreadsheet for all of you.
They're callous now. They're calloused hands.
They're very callous. The carpal tunnel and Bengay has been flowing So we made a spreadsheet that is color coded and everything, and it's literally what we're going to be referencing this entire episode. So scroll down on your phone or on your computer on YouTube or in podcast form in the show notes for this episode. We will have a link to a Google Doc that we have created, and it has the spreadsheet that we're going to be talking about here. And what the spreadsheet shows, the data that it shows is basically what I just said. What the players have put up to date so far as of the time we are recording this. When the Padres are 55 and 60, and what they were projected to do, and then John has then also filled in what the Zip system thinks they'll be doing over the rest of the season. And so that can kind of give us a sense of how has Zips interpreted these players have changed from the beginning of the season based on the data that they have given us. So let's just jump in.
I want to see how this goes, because I mean, we're nerdy people who put together like these documents that we go through for every single episode. And it might be such that folks would actually want to see like exactly how the sausage is made and what we're going to talk about, because we do end up not talking about a lot of things, but we do a lot of research on things that you won't even be talked about. And sometimes it's interesting. So I could imagine a scenario in which people would want access to that. And if they did, let us know, because we would try to figure out a way to make that practical, or, see how that would work.
Yeah, totally. I think that this could be something that we do going forward if this bears fruit and if this is something people are interested in. So hopefully you have the spreadsheet pulled up. This is now a second screen experience that you can have with us as you're listening or watching this. And just some overall trends that I noticed that some of our hitters have exhibited. The first thing that kind of struck me by surprise is that a lot of our hitters have noticeably lower strikeout percentages this season compared to seasons in the past. So Fernando Tatis has he's incredibly reduced his strikeout rate. He's down to 19.8%. And he was projected to have a 27% strikeout rate. And it's been so long since we've seen him play. I forgot that, he was consistently getting up close to 30% strikeout rates every season. And so, this is part of a thing we're going to talk about with Tatis later. So we'll put a pin in that for now. But, Machado has a lower strikeout rate. Xander Bogaerts has a lower strikeout rate. Gary Sanchez has a much lower strikeout rate. And Luis Campusano has a lower strikeout rate than was projected by Zips. There are some other players who have gone the other direction, and we'll talk about them, but that was a K-rate thing that I noticed right then and there. That was a pleasant surprise. Any thoughts on that before I move to the next one?
Yeah, I probably spoiled it by talking about it at this topic, but there's this famous thing. I might have talked about it on a podcast before, but that obviously regular season baseball is just different than postseason baseball. It just is. But it's difficult to find like the correlations between success with a team in the regular season and a team in the playoffs. And I feel like everybody on the Discord knows that if you want to get under my skin, it's to bring up the stat that like whoever hits most home runs in a game wins that game, which is like, yeah, obviously because they hit more home runs. So you're automatically spotting them a few runs of advantage when that happened. But it's not that a team who has more homers during the regular season has an advantage in the playoffs. In fact, they don't. There's like basically no correlation between that. But the thing that has the highest correlation, at least so far, between playoff baseball and success is a regular season team that strikes out at a lower rate. So I do wonder now, we're getting to a different phase in baseball, if we're trying to kind of like force that onto our team, like let's strike out less. And I could see that as a strategy going forward when you think that you're a playoff team.
So just so I'm wrapping my head around this is like a kind of response to three true outcomes-ism of like being like, three true outcomes being like home run, strikeout, walk, and basically being like, your Joey Gallo types of like, we accept these type of players. You're saying that this is almost like post three true outcomes-ism?
Maybe, or maybe it's that every team has three true outcomes, but the ones that strike out the fewest, that therefore they are just the best. It's correlation. It's not causation, right? So over the past like 15 years or so, the only correlation between a regular season skill and leading to postseason wins is low strikeout rate. And probably the reason why that is because once you get to the playoffs, you only play great pitchers, and if you're able to make at least contact and deal with bad BABIP luck, then you're likely to at least get some runs across. And if you do that, then you're likely to win in all these like low scoring environments or lower scoring environments. Probably. It might also just be that every team has the same strategy, and whichever team strikes out the least, that means that they're getting more home runs and getting more walks because they're not striking out. And it just is just, showing that a successful team was successful. Yeah. But I could see that as a strategy going forward. Correlation does not imply causation. However, the strongest correlation with success in the playoffs is striking out the least.
Got it. Okay. Well, on the flip side, or sort of related to that, this is not going to be shocking to anyone who's watched the Padres this year. The team's walk rate has gone up. We've gotten the most walks in the majors, so that's not surprising. So basically everyone across the board, their walk rate is either held steady with their projection or gone up, except for two notable exceptions, and we will talk about them individually in a second. But those two people are Fernando Tatis Jr. and Manny Machado. So not people who you want to hear that their walks have gone down at a noticeable rate. So we'll come back to them in a little bit. And the last thing I wrote as an overall trend, which is also kind of like a specific player trend, is that Ha-Seong Kim is a god and is like outpacing his projections like so much that it's worth having its own talking point. If you're looking at the spreadsheet that we have created, like, we have color coded it such that if someone's like overperforming or doing better against their projection on a certain stat, that it's green. And then if they're doing poorly compared to their projection, it's orange. And like Ha-Seong Kim is like the only player who is like green. So that is like really, really cool to look at. There were a few standouts for me looking at Ha-Seong Kim versus his projections. First of all, this is something we talked about when we did his episode. So someone is listening to us in the Padres organization, which is very cool, which is, John, you had pointed out that Ha-Seong Kim is very fast. He's very fast, and he should be running more. That, yeah. You remember that? Yeah, you did that. You said that. And
I'm smart.
You're very smart. And he was projected by Zips to only put up 10 stolen bases, so like total in 2023. Yeah, wow. And he's put up 27 already, and he's projected to put up 6 more. So, 30 plus stolen bases is something that Ha-Seong Kim is definitely going to do. And I was not expecting that from the beginning of the season. That's great. His walk rate, he was projected to put up an 8.5% walk rate, and it's up to 12.9% on the season, like literally almost a 50% rise in his walk rate. And one of the cool things that of you putting in the rest of season projections, John, is we get to see how that changes. And I think it's already noticeable in Ha-Seong Kim, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, so like you said, he was projected to have a walk rate of about 8.5%, and now for the rest of the season, they project him at 10.2%. So that's basically them adjusting their standard, saying that this guy does draw more walks. And I don't know, this is not statistically based, so deviating off of our statistical base thought process, does it not seem like he's not getting quite as many just terrible calls against him as he did in those first 2 years? He probably, besides Manny Machado, I feel like he led the Padres in just terrible calls against him. And I don't know if he's like into that, semi-star level now where he's just getting a little bit more respect, but it doesn't seem like he's getting quite as many just like, how is that possibly a strike calls?
He might, honestly, like I really do think that there is something to that where like they, like Umpire Auditor is a great follow. Like they post on TikTok and like some other social media where they'll be like, and they posted like the top 10 misses of the month and like of like how far off the plate the bad calls were. And like I one of the things I did note is like rarely are they star players that are getting like absolutely hosed at the plate on bad calls. It's usually guys towards the bottom of the lineup. So I think like Yasmani Grandal was like the one I noted the most. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, he got kind of screwed. Continuing on the Ha-Seong Kim fest, the dude is slugging. I mean, he's slugging 450, which is not like, for the, if you were to like be like, who's a slug god, like for a 450 slug is not like you're destroying worlds per se, but for a guy who was projected to put up a 387 slugging percentage, like that is a massive improvement. And the thing when I was looking at Ha-Seong Kim's stat line from this year that I was like, this looks familiar, I was like, oh, this looks like Ha-Seong Kim in the KBO. Because like he currently has a 134 WRC plus, and his last 2 seasons in the KBO, he put up a 143 WRC plus and a 141 WRC plus, and I'm pretty sure he won the MVP in the KBO in one of those 2 seasons. And also like his walk rate, it was 12% in his last KBO season, and now he's walking at a 12% clip now. The one thing is like, he strikes out more in Major League Baseball. That doesn't necessarily surprise me. Like the level of pitching it's just at a different level. But again, he's getting on base at a 384 clip this year, and in the KBO, in 2019, he got on base 389. In 2020, it was 397. So, this is a guy who I think we're really seeing that last bit of development, that final 30% that I can't remember if it was Kevin Towers or Josh Burns who said something like that. The final 30% of development happens in the major leagues. Like, I think that we're seeing that now he has consistent playing time. He's becoming that dude, John.
I need you to close your eyes or at least stop looking at the document for a second, because Xander Bogaerts has 2.6 WAR so far this year. I mean, I don't think that anybody would argue that he's played amazing, but I mean, a 2.6 WAR, if that's your floor, that's not terrible. Yeah. You said 451 isn't amazing for a slugging percentage from a middle infielder. What do you think Xander Bogaerts is? So Ha-Seong Kim, 451. Just take a wild guess at what Xander Bogaerts is for slug.
I feel like I saw it already today, so I don't feel like this is like entirely.
That's fine. That's fine.
I want to say it's like 374.
388. So 63 points. 63 points lower than Ha-Seong Kim is established star Xander Bogaerts. So yeah, you can say that's not that great for a second baseman, but in reality, it's pretty freaking great for a second baseman.
Yeah. And I'm just looking back to there was an article that Dan Szymborski of Zip, the Zip's godfather, who he put out on October 12th, 2020. And the article was titled, Ha-Seong Kim has big MLB aspirations and projections. And I remember when we signed Ha-Seong Kim, this was the first article I read about him. And I looked at his Zips projections, and I was like, holy crap. This is really, really impressive, because he was being projected at putting up 3.5 to 4 WAR a year from 2021 to 2025. And I became an evangelist of this dude, because that's how much I trust Zips. And he was, he was projected to put up somewhere between a 115 and a 120 OPS plus when he came here. And like now, he's finally past that. Like he's having a season that is even better than what this Zips projection imagined for him. So it's really remarkable. And I mean, like, again, it's like we're seeing, other KBO stars coming over. I'm thinking that Ha-Seong Kim could really be a template for like what success looks like. And
you know what's funny about that article is that it came out and said that first of all, it didn't make any sense, because like how much we signed him for, if that was correct, we signed him for like 1/4 of what he was worth, right? So like that made me a little bit skeptical, and so did just like transitioning to the major leagues make me skeptical. But if you look at that article, which I recommend that everybody look at it, just to have seen it, because it's just interesting for historical purposes, and also how Zips kind of ranks people coming into the major leagues for the first time. But it thought that Ha-Seong Kim's value was going to be derived primarily from his bat rather than his glove. And so he's starting to approach those bat projections while having glove projections that they didn't even account for at all, which means that suggests that his ceiling is such that Zips projection is kind of his floor. Because if he's giving a defensive value that's already close to that projection, and then starts to have the bat that they think that he has, then now he's a 5 WAR plus player, just year in and year out.
I just want to read the final paragraph from this, and then we'll move on from Kim. But this is the article that John and I are referencing right now. And it's Dan Szymborski says, quote, "Those are the projections of a player who ought to be highly sought after, even in an offseason full of uncertainty due to COVID-19 and the relating economic downturn. Normally, a player like this would get north of $100 million, though it remains to be seen just how teams will view him this winter, given the possibility for additional perceived risk for a player from a different league. If Kim comes to the majors and doesn't get a guaranteed contract worth $50 million, some team likely got a hell of a deal from their point of view. And then it just kind of goes on. But I just want to point that out when, like, again, it's like when he came here and he struggled at first, everyone was like, oh my God, we gave this guy $30 million. Like, what the fuck? And it's just like,
that is what people sound like.
Anyone who disagrees with me, that's what they sound like. So anyway, Ha-Seong Kim's fucking amazing. And I don't know, maybe we'll sign him to an extension. I don't know how we're gonna pay for it.
Also when we're putting like that's a guy that's worth at least $100 million. So then what's a guy who was worth $100 million and then shows that he's a like 5-WAR player for multiple years and is approaching free agency still in his 20s worth? The answer is not $100 million. It's certainly a lot more than $100 million. So let's stop asking let's stop asking for a Cronenworth like deal with him. He is a dude that needs to get paid. And so you can say you want Ha-Seong Kim, but it probably means you want Ha-Seong Kim instead of Juan Soto and not both.
Yeah. And again, this is the button for the extension talk for Ha-Seong Kim. If he wants to sign a team-friendly deal and stay here, amazing. Great. Absolutely. We should celebrate that. But if they're going to pay him market value, wait until next year. Don't make the Machado mistake. Turning his best year into his free agent year. Like, you don't have to do that. You have a whole nother year to see how he performs. So, and then you still have an exclusive negotiating window for a few weeks after the season. So, like, again, let's just keep that in mind. Moving on. Juan Soto. Juan Soto is Juan Soto. Like, that's the amazing thing. Is like, this guy was projected before the season to be a 6.5 WAR player. And with a couple of hiccups that we'll talk about, he's basically on pace to do that. Like, he's on base to do just under 6, I think. So this is like
5.9, yeah.
Yeah, a 40th percentile outcome probably for Juan Soto. And that's unbelievable. Like, his 40th percentile is fucking 6 WAR. And
yeah.
Do you have anything you want to say on that before I talk about his strikeouts?
I do just want to think about like okay, so this is basically who he is. Maybe this is the 40th percentile of Juan Soto, but like every player has their 40, that's not something crazy that would happen. Obviously, it's 40th percentile. If you don't like Juan Soto now, you're just never going to like Juan Soto, because Juan Soto is good, and this is what good Juan Soto looks like. There is another level up. He can have a 75th percentile, and he'll be a little bit better, but all the flaws you see are still going to be there. He's still going to walk when you wanted him to have tried to put the ball in play. He's still going to, hit homers. He's going to smash his homers, but then like take another pitch that he could have hit and you say that could have been a homer too, but he'll take it because it wasn't the pitch that he could hit 500 feet. Like this is Juan Soto. So if you don't like this Juan Soto, who's like nearly what he has always been, it has a higher WRC plus than his career WRC plus, by the way, then you don't like Juan Soto. That's just what you don't like. And that's fine. Well, but that's what it is.
The other thing about Juan Soto is that, like, one of the criticisms that I've heard about the idea that we might offer him an extension is that, like, he's a future DH. Like, he doesn't provide you any value, like, in the future, because, like, he'll be a DH, or, like, and like, you have to, if you're going to give someone $500 million, like, they have to be able to provide you value on the field. But he's like not providing us any defensive value now. That's the thing, is like, he's a bad defender this year, and he's still, going to put up close to 6 WAR if he keeps playing the way that he keeps playing. So like that part of it like doesn't bother me. The thing that is really intriguing to me about Juan Soto this year, that is, it's basically every one of his stats are in line with the demigod that he was projected to be, except for one thing. He's striking out a lot more. And when I say a lot more, I don't mean like to a point where it's a problem. Like, but Juan Soto is someone who, over the course of his career, during his, his last 3 seasons, 2020, 2021, and 2022, his K rate was incredibly consistent. 14.3%, 14.2%, 14.5%. And his walk rate was always north of 20%. in those same years. This year, he's striking out slightly more often than he's walking, which he's hasn't done since he was basically a rookie. And his walk rate is 19.6%, and his K rate so far this year is 20.4%. And I'm like, why is that? Like what is the reasoning? And I was going through, a StatCast, and I was kind of stumped. Like the one thing you can say is like, okay, like he's not really generating like sorry, this is kind of I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Like what is different in his swing profile? And you can kind of say, okay, like he's swinging slightly less. He's swinging slightly less, and he's whiffing slightly more. And that's like literally the only thing that I can see that's different. It's just that he's become a player who's already like has the stingiest, like least likely to swing bat in baseball, has become like even stingier. And as a result, like he's taking a few more pitches than he probably should. His swing take run value in the heart of the plate is, it's just a level, it's just a 1 run so far this year, where normally he's like 4 runs, 5 runs, 7 runs. So that's kind of the biggest difference I see from his profile. But I don't know, is there anything that you've dug into that makes you think you might know why this is happening?
So you said his whiff percentage is worse. It's like literally the same. It's 21.7 versus 21.5 for his career. So
yeah, just comparing to the last couple of years.
It's almost the exact same. And, so what are manners in which you might strike out more? You could chase more. Is he chasing more? He's actually down 1.3% in terms of how often he chases. You can have worse zone contact. So you can, like, when the ball is in the zone, you make contact with it less percentage of the time. Is that happening? No. He's actually making contact more than he has for his career. The things that are the difference between now and the rest of his career, the only things I can see are passivity. That's the only thing. It's like when the ball's in the zone, he swings at it a lower percent of the time. In general, he swings less percent of the time. On the first pitch, he swings less percent of the time. So there's more likely that he falls behind, and there's more likely that he's getting through a count, and there's more likely that a pitch on the corner that he says is a ball and the umpire thinks it's a strike, he strikes out, And is that valuable? Does that hurt him? It probably hurts him a little bit more than some might think, especially with 2 outs or 2 strikes. I do wonder whether you could unlock him a little bit with a change in his 2-strike approach, but his skill is not any different. In fact, it might be a little bit better because he's just so good at seeing something off the plate and saying, nah, I'm not swinging at that.
Yeah. The other thing, and again, it's like you're saying, his zone swing percentage is down 3.3 points off of his career. His meatball swing percentage, I love that stat, by the way. Meatball swing percentage. So again, it's exactly what it sounds like. How many times is he swinging at a meatball, middle, like whatever you want to say of like the ideal pitch. That one's also like down like, 1.6% over the course of his career. So like, again, it's just like, I just think it's like, he's just a little more passive, and that little bit more passivity bumps up his strikeout rate 5%. Like, because I'm really not seeing like a lot of like other differences in his swing profile. Yeah, no. So I'm not worried.
Looks the same.
Yeah. And to me, it feels sort of fixable. Like where you're like, hey buddy, like, cause it feels like, again, the whole team is being more passive. This feels like an advanced scouting, like, hey, we're taking this strategy as a team. And if you, like you're saying, kind of unlock him a little bit more, like, I don't think he suddenly forgets how to hit. Like, I think he's like, oh, all right, let's do this.
I bet after this year is done, like there's always every single offseason, there's like a new wave of like analytics and different ways that teams are trying to take advantage of things. I would bet that 2-strike approach is going to have some very interesting data that's coming out because you want to have a long at bat. You just do it. It benefits you in so many ways. There's a much higher chance that you have a walk, which is obviously is extraordinarily valuable. There's a much higher chance that you tire out a pitcher, but once the meat is on the bone, once there's 2 strikes, the at-bat just changes. And so does 2-strike approach matter? Are you supposed to like cut down on your swing like the old days? Are you supposed to like choke up on the bat? Are you supposed to like try to work the count even more? How valuable is the 2-strike approach? I would bet a lot of money that there's going to be like changes in terms of like what that means in game theory.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about with Soto before we move on to Toddy?
No, he's good. Everybody should like him. Also, he should bat higher in the order.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Get him as many plate appearances as possible. The guy who, the way things are going right now, maybe needs to move down in the order a little bit. Fernando Tatis Jr. So the bottom line about Fernando Tatis Jr. is that Fernando Tatis Jr. is still very good. He is still a very good baseball player, and we're very lucky to have him on the team, and we're very lucky to have him for the contract that we have him at on this team. There are, however, some things we need to talk about. One of the things we have already talked about, his K rate is way down. Like I said, currently 19.8% from a projected 27%. His walk rate is also down, which is bad. 7.1% from a projected 10.2%. And if you look at his projections versus his actual stats, the one thing that really jumps out to me is that this dude's power is really not what it was. His slugging percentage is down 103 points from where it was projected to be. He was projected to slug 570, John. That was his 50th percentile projection, was 570. And he's slugging 467, which again is not like terrible. It's not horrible. It's something that you take from your average player every time. It's just not what you're expecting from Fernando Tatis Jr. So also, of course, as a result of that, his isolated power is down as well. But the other thing that, again, like kind of struck me is that it seems like he is swinging at shittier pitches more often. And that is why he's striking out less. But it isn't leading to, when someone lowers their K rate, that's something you usually celebrate. But if you look at his underlying peripheral statistics, his chase rate is up to 34% from a career average of 30%. So that's not, and by the way, before this season, it never eclipsed 30%. So that this year alone has brought his career chase percentage up to 30. And he's, like I've said, he's at 34% for the year. His chase contact rate also way up. His career rate is 48.2%, and he's currently hitting 55.1%. So he's making contact with pitches that he's chasing 55.1% of the time. And, again, like he's swinging way, 11% more at first pitch strikes or first pitch swings in general than he is over his career average. And his swing rate is up 5.5%. So all of that to me says that he's swinging at shittier pitches and putting those pitches in play. And therefore, that's why the results are worse. Is like the balls that, would normally be taken and then increase his walk rate and Tatis would sit back on, those balls are now being hit into the field of play, which is then bringing his overall numbers down. So what do you make of this, John?
I make of it that it's a 24-and-a-half-year-old who really wants to make a difference and had a year off that a lot of people gave him a lot of shit for, basically. And he wants to hit 2 home runs per at bat, and he's swinging as much as he can. His contact is amazing. He's doing a lot of great contact. His xWOBA is in the 94th percentile. You said that his slugging is falling off. His xSlug is in the 95th percentile with an expected slug of 544. And why is it so much lower than the 467 that it actually is? Maybe because he gets robbed of a homer like every other game, it seems like. It's impossible to argue that he's hitting the ball poorly. His xWOBA was 94th percentile. He's playing a great in right field. His outs above average are 98th percentile. His arm is in the 98th percentile. I don't even know who's in the 99th percentile because anybody in the outfield who has a stronger arm than Tatis, I would like to see it because I don't believe it. However, he's also a 24-and-a-half-year-old who has been struggling and the team is 5 games under. And the reason why he has a low K rate, in my mind, is the same reason that he has a low walk rate. It's because he wants to go up there and he wants to hit, which in reality is a advantageous thing for our lineup as a whole, because our lineup is very passive. And I want the guy. I want not everybody in our lineup, but I want a couple guys littered throughout that go up there looking to hit. Campusano is one of those guys, and I've loved his addition to the team. Gary Sanchez, same thing. Tatis is a guy that I want going up there looking to hit. He's way more dramatically doing it than I would think behooves him in terms of success. But his skill is there. It's not something where I'm like, oh man, this guy got hurt and now he's not good. I really don't think that is the truth. I think that he is in his head a little bit, but he's still smashing baseballs. He's still a very, very valuable player, especially compared to his contract. I would like him to drop down in the lineup, not because I think that he's struggling, which he is struggling, but actually because he is a guy that attacks the baseball. And I want the guy that attacks the baseball to do that in the third or fourth spot rather than in the second spot, because I want the bases there to be players on the bases before he goes up there trying to clear the bases. He's a great player. He is 24 years old, 24 and a half. He is younger than Alec Jacob, who just made his major league debut. He's younger than Jay Groom, who hasn't made his major league debut. He's younger than Corey Howell, who we hope might someday make a major league debut. He's a young guy, and he's pressing. That's what I think about Tatis Jr.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about Juan Manuel Machado. So, Manny, again, some of the stuff we've already talked about, we'll just get off the plate. Strikeout rate slightly down, 17.5%, just like Tatis, and walk rate also down 8.4% from his projected 9.8%. However, some things that we need to talk about. His overall, just straight WRC plus is down to 110 from a projected 127. His OPS is down to 766 from a projected 806. And there's something else on the StatCast side of things that really scares me. I think the overall position of this podcast on Machado's extension is pretty well established. We think it was a massive overpay. I personally don't have a problem with, overpaying a little bit to keep a guy like, Manny, who means a lot to the franchise in town. But the degree to which we overpaid and also when we did it, i.e. making his MVP practically year, his free agent year, as opposed to waiting and making this when he's not going to even hit for WAR, maybe his free agent year, was, how you say, not good. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, and this was pointed out in the Zips article about his extension, is that in 2021, Manny Machado had an average exit velocity in the 96th percentile in Major League Baseball. In 2022, his average exit velocity was in the 89th percentile in Major League Baseball. In 2023, that number is down to the 77th percentile. And John, why? We've talked about this off mic, but what do we think that trend is related to?
It is related to age. So, Manny Machado, great hitter. Nobody questions that. He is a great hitter. His carrying quality is that he has great bat speed. And bat speed is known to fall off with age more than basically any other quality that you can have in a hitter. And it's why Xander Bogaerts, who is not known for his bat speed, is more likely to have a longer career hitting with quality, even if that quality is just, above 100 WRC plus, than Manny Machado in most estimation models. And that's because once your bat speed falls off, when you used to have high bat speed, your numbers can tank quite quickly. And I was at a Rockies game the other day, and I saw an Ian Desmond jersey. And I was like, oh yeah, Ian Desmond. I remember him being so good, for a while. And then I looked up when it was that he fell off. And it turns out that he fell off exactly as soon as he turned 30 years old, where he went from a 4 WAR player consistently year over year to just like immediately he was bad at the age of 30. And we signed this guy till he's 41. So there's going to be a drop off, and really it's just Russian roulette until when. And so I don't think it's now. Like, certainly I don't think that now is when the drop off. I don't think he's going to be like Ian Desmond and out of the league in 2 years. But I do think that every year we're like, is this the year that he's no longer a good hitter? Is this the year? And it's going to be scary every single year to, like Will Myers, great hitter. He is basically out of the league, and he's basically the same age, right? Like, players just fall off. And lots of times it's because you have a carrying quality like Will Myers or Manny Machado that is bat speed. And as soon as your bat speed disintegrates, it's like, crap, man, is this a major league player anymore?
Yeah. Which is why when I look at, we've obviously talked about his slugging and everything, but the one stat that is down 30 points from his projection is his BABIP, his batting average on balls in play. And there's two things that BABIP tells us. It can either tell us if a player is getting lucky or unlucky in a smaller sample size versus a larger sample size, or it can just tell us that their quality of contact is better or worse than what it's been. And so what I typically like to cross-reference between BABIP, if I'm trying to determine is someone lucky or are they worse, or vice versa, is to look at their expected numbers and say, okay, if someone's BABIP is lower than their projection, but their expected numbers are also showing that they're getting unlucky, then that's kind of there's a trend there. They're kind of a piece. And Machado's BABIP is down to 258 off of a 288 projection for this season. And his expected WOBA is 329 off an actual WOBA of 328. So his actual output is in line with his expected output based on the quality of contact. So to me, that tells me that he's just hitting the ball worse, like reading those tea leaves. So am I worried? Like, I'm not like 4 alarm fire worried, but I'm like, Manny Machado just turned 31. Like, and this is when these stats like tend to start falling off. So like, is this an aberration, or are we already seeing the decline the year that we're starting to pay him $35 million a year? So, I'm sorry to, put a damper on this, but I just think it's crazy. It's crazy.
He is the one. So, I mean, we fill a certain archetype, right? And we're like the statistically minded folks on the podcast. And so we don't go into vibes quite as much, I think, as maybe some other people. But statistically speaking, he is the player, even including Xander Bogaerts, that I think both of us are most concerned about his contract meeting the expectations. Yeah. And Jay Cronenworth.
We're going to get to him in a little bit. Well, let's talk about Xander. I find it so comical that we thought that we were going to do this in a brief amount of time. We do tend to to really get into the nitty gritty. We were like, we're just going to talk about the hitters. It'll be fast. So Xander.
Our estimation of this was a 25 to 30 minute episode.
Yeah, we're a fucking joke, dude. Come on. And so we talked about Xander a little bit. His exit velo is down against his career. His hard hit percentage is also down against his career. It's 3% lower. And we could talk about him being hurt and like his wrist, and like maybe that has something to do with it. But this is something we talked about in, I think, the second episode ever of Pods Above Replacement was the Xander Bogaerts episode.
One of the most popular, by the way.
Most popular episode? Yeah.
One of the most popular. I think.
Oh, one of the most popular. Okay. And for good analysis like this, John, what is something that Xander Bogaerts has done throughout his career?
It's overperform his expected WOBA. He's always had a WOBA that's much better than his expected WOBA.
And why do we think that is, John?
I don't know. We had a question on the episode, and our thought process was, one, everybody at Fenway Park outperforms their expected WOBA. And however, there was the counter argument that I laid out was that yes, everybody who plays at Fenway Park outperforms their expected WOBA. However, when they go to a new park, they do not have the same WOBA or expected WOBA, but it's not quite as bad as you would think. It's still, it's worse, but it's not like your expected WOBA that you would have had at Fenway Park is often like 20 points, 30 points lower. And you don't normally fall all the way down to that nadir of whatever the expected WOBA is. Usually it's somewhere in between the WOBA and the expected WOBA.
Yeah. So, the thing about Xander is I don't think needs to, I mean, simply for the fact that he's getting paid less money than Manny Machado, like he doesn't need to perform at quite the same level for his contract to be worth it. I mean, he's getting paid $25 million a year and he's already put up 2.6 WAR. So he's like basically going to pay for himself this year, even in this year that I think everyone would roundly consider to be a quote unquote down year for him. And as you mentioned, like he's not someone who's made his money on bat speed. He's not someone who, is someone who's going to have a rapidly degrading hit tool that we would expect, at least. So my level of worry about Xander, is not super high. We can argue about the merits of signing him in the first place all day. I don't really think that it gets us anywhere, to be completely honest, because he's here. So, okay. That's kind of like all I have to say about Xander. I think that he played in Fenway and that was very advantageous to him. And now he's playing in Petco and that's super disadvantageous to him. And yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah. My argument is similar. It's like, is he going to transition to second base at some point? I think that his defense will play very well at second base, by the way.
Yep.
And I think he'll be an above average second baseman with an above average second base bat. I think that kind of his floor is, 3 WAR for like a while his bat starts to fall off. And that's just a really good second baseman. The arguments really have nothing to do with Xander as much as they do. Like, did we outbid ourselves? Or we put him at the wrong position? And most importantly to me is like, how do we do that medical evaluation exactly? Like, what do we know? What do we know about that? Did we know about that? I would assume that we did, but I don't know. It's a chronic injury that I'm not super excited about, having a staple of my team be someone who has a chronic injury. And like, anytime a pitch comes inside, I'm like, oh, is he going to be out for 6 weeks? Like, but
agreed. That's it for Xander Bogaerts talk. Not a lot there. Let's get to a nice surprise since we've been a little bit Debbie Downer for the last like 15 or 20 minutes. Yeah. Gary Sanchez, dude. Like, he is having an exceptional year and the computer thinks so too. The number one thing to note with Gary Sanchez is that his K rate is way, way, way down. I mean, that was the kind of archetype about like, if you ever like had the misfortune of crawling onto Yankees Twitter sometime between 2017 and 2020, it was always about Gary Sanchez just striking out so much. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like they were just so up in arms about it. And he was projected to strike out 28.2% of the time this year.
One question. You have been on Yankees Twitter? That's something that you did with your spare time? Hey, my coming fiance, now wife, I needed some time so I can check out Yankees Twitter. That's something you've done?
John, one thing you should know about me is I'm a very online person. But one of the things about the Twitter machine, especially now, is that it gives you a bunch of shit that you don't actually want. Like, and certainly then that was true, and even now more so. So anyway, yeah, Yankees Twitter didn't like him. And now we are stunting on them because Gary Sanchez is a good player for us. The other thing about Gary Sanchez is that, he was always like a, low average, high slug guy. And, he was projected to be so, but not to the degree that he's reached that level, because he was projected to have a 219 batting average. He's hitting 220, right in line. However, he was projected to only slug 436, and he's slugging 514, John. Over 500 slugging percentage. I think that is good. Is that good?
According to my calculator, that is a good slugging percentage. Correct.
That is good. And he is putting out a 119 WRC plus versus a 112 as he was projected. I would even argue.
Yeah, what the hell?
John. Is your full name Jonathan? Do you hate that?
No, it is not. By the
It's
way,
just John?
most people with a H in their name are not full name Jonathans. I want to get that out to the public. We are different people. Jons tend to be Jonathans. Johns tend to be Johns.
Okay. Okay, well, John,
if there's one thing you take away from this podcast, it is
that's actually good. I didn't know that. That's actually great. His BABIP is a ghastly 203, and he was projected for a 260. And if you look at his expected numbers, it's not egregious. I think his expected WOBA is 346, and he's putting up something close to 330. So he's not getting super unlucky to the point where you're like, what's going on? But I don't see any reason why Gary Sanchez can't play like this for the rest of the season. Do you?
No, and so I was not on Yankees Twitter. However, I did recently read. I did recently read an article. I forget what it was, but it was some New York based article on Gary Sanchez, and it was kind of like us with Trace Thompson last year, kind of stunting on ourselves for like, how did we get this wrong? And the article conclusion was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have used this guy as a DH. Maybe he was better as a catcher, which is like, yeah, duh, dummies. Yeah. Like, so the Zips projections for him suggest a 112 WRC plus, and it's really just like, I mean, a 112 WRC plus from a catcher is like amazing. If you're like competent at all behind the plate, that is great. And I do think that maybe Padres fans are a little bit skewed in their analysis of Gary Sanchez because we watched Austin Nola, who both couldn't frame and also couldn't throw someone out. Yeah. Whereas like Gary Sanchez can like kind of frame and can definitely throw someone out. And we're like, this dude's the greatest. But his defense is not actually very good. But compared to Austin Nola, his defense is fine or better than fine. And he does have a bat. He has a very specific kind of bat, which is I'm going to strike out a lot. I'm not going to get on base a lot. But when I make contact, it's going to be some pretty damn good contact. But who in their right minds would not take that from their catcher? Like, I would take that from my catcher every day, as long as the defense isn't horrendous. And especially with the new pitch com, where like all he has to do is like focus on trying to frame a little bit and then going up to the plate and hitting bombs. Take that guy every day of the week. I did want to play a game with you wherein we talk about Gary Sanchez. So he is, we got him as a DFA. He does not have any arbitration years left. He will be a free agent coming up in this next season. We have catching prospects on the horizon that are probably not going to be ready next year. What are your thoughts on re-signing Gary Sanchez? First, just tell me, is it something you'd think about?
Yeah, what's our choice? I mean, it's Brett Sullivan, I guess, is our second catcher. So I would absolutely look into signing Gary Sanchez because, again, like you said, like we have Ethan Salas obviously in the system. Just announced today that he's the number 5 prospect in all of baseball according to MLB Pipeline, which is fucking sick.
Fuck yeah.
And he's at least, going to arrive in 2025 at the earliest, and he would still only be 19 years old, like if he did that, which is crazy. And I know we have Brandon Valenzuela somewhere down there too, and he could be here a little bit sooner, but probably not.
His ECA is 2024. He so far had a 136 WRC plus at high A and has had 100 plate appearances at double A with a 51 WRC plus.
Well, that's not good. Yeah, but that's also only 100 plate appearances, and I'd be willing to give him some time. But yeah, again, it's like that means he's going to start next
season,
year,
right?
No. We need at least someone next year. It's the question is like, do you think that Brandon Valenzuela can break camp with the team going into the 2025 season? Which like maybe.
All right.
Like,
so that was the first question. Now you're willing to negotiate with him. I am Gary Sanchez's agent, and you are AJ Preller. Let's start negotiating. So, in the last couple of years, Gary Sanchez has consistently put up about $10 million of value. He's pretty much always 1.5 WAR. He has a good bat. His defense has fluctuated more than his bat. He only had one bad season, which was 2020 in that short year. So should we even count that? No. As the agent, I say we shouldn't. And the rest of the years, it's been 1.5 or more pretty much. which to me suggests I want at least $10 million a year. This past year, he only ended up getting, what was it? I think it was like $5 million in the free agent contract. Let's just go with that. I think it was something like that. So about $5 million. I want an upgrade on that because he's had a good year this year. So what I want for Gary Sanchez is a 2-year, $20 million contract, and I want an option for another year at $10 million.
A player option or a club option?
Player option.
No. Get out of my office.
Okay.
No, because like he's getting paid $1.5 million this year. And I think that's a great opening offer from you, the agent. I think you're doing a good job. So I would counter to you with a 2-year, $10 million contract. And I'm also going to have the second year be a team option with a $1 million buyout. So it's actually an $11 million contract. So we're paying him $6 million for next year. And then it's a team option for $5 million on the following year. Are you taking that deal for your client?
So pause in this negotiation because I don't want you to know this information. But actually, Gary Sanchez signed a $1.5 million contract with $1 million in incentives, despite the fact that he just put up 1.3 F4, which seems kind of wild. Like, that past agent should have done better, but I guess he did get DFA'd immediately.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so your argument is 2 years, 10 million with an option year.
It's 2 years, 11 million, really.
Yeah, I'm not doing that at all. I mean, he's consistently put up $10 million, and you don't have a catcher next year. Like, you just don't. So I need some money, Peter Siler. I know you have it. You've already put up, what is it? 1.7 WAR as a Padre alone in 54 games.
Okay.
That's nearly 20 million in value just alone. So okay, I'll negotiate down. I will do 2 years, 15 million, and I want a player option for 1 year at 10 million.
Well, I'm not giving you that player option because why would I pay you more in the third year? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
That's fair. Okay, so then
go ahead.
A player option 1 year at 10 million if I satisfy getting 2 WAR over the first 2 seasons.
I don't like this WAR in the contract shit because, like, which WAR are we using? It's like a whole thing.
F4.
Like, I don't know.
There's only one good WAR.
No. Okay. So here's the thing. I will give you 2 years and $15 million straight up. Are you taking that or are you leaving it?
I'll take it. 2 years, $15 million.
Great.
Gary Sanchez.
Okay. How do you feel about that contract?
He is just about to be in his 31-year-old contract. I feel requisite amount of shit we pay too much, but also I'd take it. You know what I mean? Like, which is how an agent interaction should go.
That's good. We both did our jobs. I'm also a little bit, because again, I didn't get the chance to say this, but like, again, it's like, I need to be able to make value on this deal. And if I'm paying you 3 years, $30 million, like, the most you can do is live up to the deal. So I'm not getting any value out of this. I'm giving you job security. And in return, you have to give me surplus value. So, again, this year, he's already generated $12.5 million in value, like you said. For him to, put up $7.5 million or to satisfy $7.5 million a year in value, he's got to put up like just shy of 1 WAR, which I think Gary Sanchez is very capable of doing just by running into a few home runs and playing an average catcher. So I think that's good. That's a great stopgap until Ethan Salas comes up and takes the reign with his cup of coffee in 2025 and then starting the season in 2026 with the San Diego Padres as a mere 20-year-old. So very, very good. Glad.
This makes me very excited to see what Sanchez's next contract is, because I bet it's not 2 years and $15 million. I bet he gets less than that.
Yeah. So again, this is a pro labor podcast as we've discussed.
It is.
So let's kind of like speed through the rest of this. Trent Grisham, I don't have a lot to say other than he's Trent Grisham. If you're looking at the spreadsheet, he's in line with basically all of his projections, except for he's walking a little more than he was projected to, and he's striking out a little bit more than he was projected to, which is exactly what you would expect having watched Trent Grisham this year. If you were to tell me an eye test thing that's something. And the other thing I'll say is that Trent Grisham is a 100 WRC plus hitter who plays Gold Glove center field and hits in the 9-hole. Everyone needs to shut the fuck up about Trent Grisham. He's so fine. It's so fine. It's so fine. Do you have anything else?
There's the Padres hot tub reference that Craig said that somebody told him that everybody in the locker room says he sucks at hitting. And it's like, hey, fun fact, a lot of Padres suck at hitting. So like, just because he watches strike three and that is his bane. You know, that's the thing that takes him down is that he'll watch strike three. But his WRC plus is perfectly fine for a great fielding center fielder. His xWOBA, we did this off air before we started recording, but I gave Raphie 3 numbers and they were xWOBAs of 329, 322, and 324. And he guessed that Machado and Bogey had the best and Trent Grisham was slightly behind at 322. When in reality, it's that Trent Grisham is slightly above Bogey. He has the 324 xWOBA. And all of Machado, Bogey, and Grisham have basically the same xWOBA. So it's like, you want to hate on Trent Grisham? You should probably be hating on Bogey and Machado as well. And I'm saying that from a standpoint where, like, when we did our Trent Grisham episode, I was like, basically his ceiling is what we're getting right now because this is all that he can give. And I'm okay with that. Like, if this is what he can give and he can play good defense, maybe I would trade him. But if you can't trade him, he's like a perfectly fine center fielder.
Yeah. So that's all we have to say about Trent Grisham. We love Trent Grisham. Also, like, just from a purely selfish standpoint, I think he's the player who, when he hits a home run, I get the most excited. I get like the most hyped because like red ass Trent Grisham was like my favorite. So anytime he hits a home run, I'm like, let's go. Like, I don't know. Do you feel the same way or no? Oh, you cut out for a second. You there?
Sorry. So did you. Yeah.
Oh, I was saying I get really
all I heard was
Trent Grisham.
Red ass Trent Grisham was mine, and then I couldn't hear anymore.
Oh, he just makes me the most excited when he hits a home run. I'm just like, let's go. I'm like,
I know. So I'm just saying, if Trent Grisham was a team leader, if he was a great player for our team, I feel like our record would be different. And that has nothing to do with numbers, but it's just like it's that he's not good that like other people aren't like, yeah, let's fucking go, you know? Because like Tatis, he can do that at points, but it's only when he's doing really well.
Yeah.
And Grish, it seems like it's the same thing where it's like, be consistently good and everybody's going to be pumped. Ha-Seong Kim is doing it just like low level, just like, I'm always good. You guys, are you willing to catch my like excitement? And it's like, everybody's like, nah, I'm good. I'm not going to try to steal third base with one out just because it slightly increases our likelihood of winning.
Yeah.
But I think Grish could.
Jake Cronenworth. We do need to talk about Jake Cronenworth. So Jake is obviously having a down year. And, you know, basically everything, you know, except for his walk rate and his isolated power is down based off of his projection. And when you go and look through his stats, I mean, his K rate is slightly higher. His chase rate is slightly higher. His hard hit rate is slightly down, I believe, as a result of those two things. To me, like Jake Cronenworth, we broke him. We broke him by moving him to first base. We took a player who was pretty effective. I mean, he was two-time All-Star, you know, whatever you want to say about that. He was at least good enough to be in that conversation, whether or not you give credence to that metric.
4.1 seasons is borderline All-Star.
Yes. And Jake Cronenworth, while putting up numbers that are not good, they're not good. Don't get me wrong. He's not having a good season, but it's not like earth-shatteringly worse than what he used to be. Like where it's like this guy just like so entirely, completely fell off. What the fuck is he doing on the team? He was projected to put up 4.4 WAR by Zips this year as a second baseman with a 119 WRC plus projected. This year, he's putting up a 93 WRC plus, which again, not good, below average. We don't like that. That's a bad year from Jake Cronenworth. But it's the very fact that we put him at first base that is now means that he's barely above replacement level at 0.6 WAR. And I truly believe that, like, because he's now at first base, he tried to, like, change his swing profile. Like, to me, the fact that he's striking out more and he's chasing more, like, it reads to me like it's almost like a season-long press where he's like, I'm trying to prove that I'm this dude. And, like, actually what made him great was that, like, he was a counter to Machado and Tatis and everything, where, like, whenever Cronenworth hits one to the opposite field, I go apeshit. I am texting people, Slappy Crone. Slappy Crone is back, baby. And, like, that's it. Like, that. And, it's so easy to be like, just go up there and hit the ball the other way. Like, it's one of the hardest things to do in sports. But, I really just hope he tries to embody this pesky type of hitter, because that's where we saw success from him in the past, John.
Yeah, and so hold on, let me do one quick calculation. Okay, so yes, one that I feel like that's obvious. I don't even know whether it has to do with, like, him going to first base and he had to, fill out a certain archetype. Probably that played into it, but for sure his approach altered his quality as a player. And there's this, like, this thought process overall. It's a rough measure of your value to a team, just from a batting standpoint, but it tends to be that about every 20 in terms of your WOBA, every 20 points you, like, get tends to be about a WAR, right? And so he's about 30 points off of his WOBA, which means that he's about 1.5 WAR value down if he had been playing second base the whole time at the normal rate that he played second base in the past, which we have no idea. Maybe he's suddenly a terrible second baseman now. But if you say that he's 1.5 WAR worse than normal, then he's still like a 3 WAR player almost at second base. He's like a 2.53 WAR player at second base that we actually have gotten 0.6 WAR because his first base defense hasn't been great according to defensive metrics, and also his bat just doesn't play at first base. So a lot of that is a self-own in my estimation. It's like, yeah, obviously you shouldn't play a second baseman at first base, partly because, like, how much value can you get out of first base with a good defender, and partly because it seems like it might have gotten his head a little bit, and a lot because if you put a second baseman's bat at first base, all statistical analysis says that you just did the wrong thing.
Yeah. Unforced error, for sure. Okay, we're going to wrap up. Luis Campusano, he's had 77 plate appearances so far. I really don't feel like doing a lot of Luis Campusano analysis. The only thing I'll say about him is that he's looked really good this year in the limited amount of time we've seen him. And if Luis Campusano, certainly if he hits at a 141 WRC plus, which is what he's hitting now, which I don't think is going to continue permanently. But if he gets anywhere close to that, that is an amazing thing for the Padres. If he hits his projection for this year, which was a 94 WRC plus from the catching position while playing a decent catcher, that's also still not as good of a thing, but still a good thing for the Padres to have, like, a league average bat at the catching position playing a serviceable catcher. Is just, for all the reasons we said for Gary Sanchez, is very valuable. That's all I have to say about Campy, and I hope he's very good. Do you have anything else before we get to the dregs?
The historical perspective on Campusano has always been that his bat is outplaying his glove, and then only in about the last year, the, like, prospect analysis perspective of him actually inversed. It was like, his framing will be good enough to make him an okay catcher, especially with, like, the pitch comp thing. It's whether his bat will carry, because he was not super successful in AAA. I mean, he was for his age, but, is his bat going to play? And so far it looks like, especially as, like, an 8-hole, 7-hole hitter, his bat speed especially is going to play, and his framing is going to play, and the pitch comp thing, I don't know, whatever that is, somebody else can say.
Yeah.
But the thought process on Campusano has always been that he is a bad defender whose bat will play. And then only in the past year, it kind of flipped where like his glove is good enough. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
But his bat might not play because of his numbers early on in AAA. But it seems as though his bat will play just fine. And his glove, at least in terms of framing, will work as well. And it's just, and especially with the pitch com, he's just a floor of an average catcher, which we will take after having experienced Osanola at a time.
All right. We are having more technical difficulties than we normally have, but we're pressing through. Dude, you're fine. It's okay. Like we record locally, so you're good. That's the advantage of using the software we use. Well, speaking of things that are performing like shit, we've come to the final two people in our podcast. God, these are human beings. Like I do want to be a little nicer than that, but like, one guy who, by the time you listen to this podcast, may no longer be on the team, and another guy who isn't on the team anymore and probably never will be again. Matt Carpenter and Austin Nola in that order. So, the thing about both guys, again, the one thing they did better this year than they've done in their projections and done in their career is that they walked more. And that's not a surprise given the way the rest of the team has performed. And literally everything else is markedly worse than their projection. Matt Carpenter, I don't want to just belabor it. Basically, everything is worse, and you can see that in the fact that he has a 72 WRC plus as a designated hitter. He's designated to hit, John. And he was the computer. Given the fact that he's 38 years old, given the fact that he had a hot pocket, and other than that, had a really kind of long and noticeable downturn in his career, still thought that he'd put up a 112 WRC plus this season, and he's putting up a 72. The one thing that I will say, looking at his peripherals, is that even in his like really, really insane like downturn, Matt Carpenter's average exit velocity always hovered around 89, 90 miles an hour. Like every time. And this season he's down to 87. And just for note, league average is 88.4. So, someone who was a career 89.5 exit velo guy is down 2.5 ticks, which might not sound like a lot, but is a really, really, really big difference. And it's the one thing that if you look at Matt Carpenter, it's the eye test totally lines that. His bat looks like he is swinging it through water. And
hummus, not even water, hummus.
Hummus. You heard it here, folks. Matt Carpenter swinging through hummus. Send it across the wire. That's all I got to say about him.
Yeah, dude, his walk rate is better than was projected, which means that part of his value is doing just fine. And that is the worst part to me, because it means that like anytime the pitch is in the zone, he is hitting it like he's swinging through hummus. And we're paying him $12 million, and we're apparently willing to take the negative hit of how much his WAR has been so far this year, and also just not play him for, I think it's 2.5 weeks now, which just hurts our roster construction as a whole, acting as though bench players don't matter. Like, this is more of like a systematic thing that is upsetting rather than him just underperforming to me.
Yeah. And I agree. And I want to wrap this up. And so we're going to talk about Osanola really quickly. And like, listen, I only included in Osanola because he is in the spreadsheets when I exported the data from Fangraphs. And I was just looking at it, and I just think it's worth noting. I'm not saying this to like stunt on him. I'm saying this because his ZiPS projection prior to the year still had Osanola as rating to have a 106 WRC plus. So I say like all this stuff. I love ZiPS. ZiPS is great. Like whatever. I don't know how the fuck they thought that he was going to hit 106 WRC plus, given the way that he's played the last couple seasons, even before this year. And they were projecting him to be worth 2.2 WAR as a catcher, which is very valuable in a timeshare. And Osanola did not that. He did not that. He had a 37 WRC plus and was worth -1 WAR, which is always impressive to me anytime someone accrues the -1 over a whole win below replacement, because like it's like it's not working and they're still leaving him in there. To me, like it's honestly kind of sad. I really think that Osanola was really affected by that fastball he took directly to the face that he rushed, just like Joe Musgrove, by the way, to get back from injury, and really rushed to grit and, got that dog in him and like whatever and be a leader or whatever. And his career can very well be over because of that. Like he may never.
He's already 33.
Yeah.
He's already 33. If you were 33 and knew like, I am a catcher who probably has 2 years to prove myself at most, and I broke my nose, do I want to make sure that I'm healthy before honestly, the answer is still yes. He probably just should have done that, but like I could see why he would be nervous about like everybody passing him by, and unfortunately everybody passed him by on the field, which hurt the team as well as his future prospects, because I don't see how he's now going to be 34 years old going into next season, and a catcher who just is coming off a -1 WAR season. It's just a sad story. Don't need to dunk on him. It's a sad story.
Yeah. So that's kind of the way the cookie crumbles for the Padres when we are looking at their ZiPS projections for 2023 versus how they've actually performed. John, we laughed, we cried, and we really thought that we were going to do this in 25 minutes. So
25 minutes.
77 minutes
That was our
later.
estimation.
Yeah. So, who knows if we ever actually put out a podcast that short. But we certainly didn't this week, but I still had a lot of fun doing it with you, John. This has been an episode of Pods About Replacement. Again, watch us on YouTube, subscribe to us, become a patron, patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. And we're going to do pitchers next week. Maybe we won't be so long-winded. Who's to say? But anything else before we send these fine folks on their way?
No, everybody, I hope you have a great week. I hope the Padres perform better, because everybody's mood is down, and I do not want everybody's mood to be down. So win a couple games, Padres. Please, I promise you, subscribing, liking, commenting, those things all help us. So if you could do it, you're a buddy, you're a pal, and you're making the world a slightly better place, because we'll be more happy. So please do that.
Yes. Well, for John Precoda, I'm Raphie Cantor. This has been another episode of Pods for Replacement, and we will see you next week.